So good morning, everyone. Just a couple of housekeeping notes. I am Don Bridges, and as Scott mentioned, I do manage the XML consulting business at Jana. Just in the housekeeping note world, the presentation, not a long one, about 20 minutes. We'll do maybe another 10 minutes of your questions, or as long as you have questions. You'll notice on the right side of your screen there is a little chat box, and if you will submit the questions, Scott will take those. If we don't get to it for whatever reason, we will come back and answer you. So easy questions, hard questions, all questions are good questions. All lines are on mute, so we'll walk through this. Just a little bit about me. I have been in the XML industry for 20 years now. Wow. That is me, the third place guy on the bicycle. I call Albuquerque, New Mexico home. It's the Sandia Mountains in the background there. And Jana has been around for almost 45 years. It is a privately held company out of Universal City, which is a suburb, easy for me to say, of San Antonio. And we have really three core areas: technical writing, engineering, and consulting. We have the great majority of that staff is technical writers or graphics illustrators. So we know a little bit about this. So maybe just to kind of level set what we're going to talk about, as Scott had mentioned and as hopefully we have presented to you when you signed up, this is a discussion about outsourced technical information services in a generic sense. The who, what, where, when, why, those kinds of questions. I'm not going to get into specific details of, well, does this company do that or this company do that? I can't answer that. But maybe I should say what it's not about. First of all, it's not about improving the quality of your content. And by that, I mean the quality of your content is a given. I mean, it's got to be right. So this is from my perspective, if it's not right, then it's kind of a non-starter. So quality is a given, it's a baseline, it's a fundamental, and while we think there are avenues to go improve the quality of your content, where you're at now is the floor. It can be no worse and can only be better. And this webinar is also not about significantly reducing costs. I know a lot of people think, oh, well, why else would you do it? And we'll get to the why as one of the questions, but while we see that sometimes outsourcing will reduce your costs, that's, from my perspective, that's not the goal here. The goal is about how do you go manage the peaks and valleys. So before I go there, maybe a little bit about what do I mean when we talk about outsourced technical information services. And invariably this means technical writing, either creating or revising creating new content, revising existing content. Same for illustrations. And illustrations may either be a derivative of an engineering CAD file, it may be a wiring diagram or plumbing diagram, but anything that's more graphical in nature. Could be a 3D graphic. Sometimes translations is a part of the equation where a customer says, hey, not only do I need the, for sake of the discussion, English version, but I also need these translated versions as well. And sometimes it's process or configuration improvement, and this is where we get into the improving the quality, improving the efficiency. And as we work with your content, invariably there might be situations where we say, these are things that we can improve, and we'll talk about those in a second. So reasons to go consider outsourcing. One of those is when you have a technology transition, when you're moving, or if you're moving from a word processing format like Word or FrameMaker to XML. There is certainly an effort there. For a while you have two systems in place and you're basically doubling your workload for some time. Hopefully at the end of the day the workload will go down, which is the reason that you're implementing new technology. The second of all is you have variable work in process, or WIP, because if you're being fed by engineering and there is a spike in the amount of engineering activity as it relates to the technical information, that can cause a change. And thirdly is catch-up. You've got this huge backlog of content that you need to process, need to catch up on, need to go incorporate into the manuals. So in a perfect world, your workload is flat as time goes on, and doesn't go up, doesn't go down, everything is flat. But I don't live in this world, and most of the technical information managers that we work with, they don't live in that world. They live in this world where, I've always invariably have more work than I've got people to go do it. And I really don't want to go hire people to go handle the peaks only to go lay them off in the valley. That's not a good situation. So that's really what we want to talk about is how do you go manage this situation, which I suspect is more typical than not. So when is a good time to go look at outsourced technical information services? And the answer is before you need it. Why? Because it takes time to not only from a contractual perspective get your outsourced supplier in place. You have technology that you need to go acclimate them to, and you have procedures that you need to make sure that they're familiar with. There's workflows that need to be incorporated or modified to go handle this outsourced component, and then you need to go agree upon the reporting requirements. So before you need it is really a good time to go say, what is my card slogan? What is my ace in the hole here? So where should your outsourced tech writers be? And we think North America, and the reason that we say that, and specifically the United States and Canada, and we say that for a couple of reasons. First of all, there is no language barrier, and it's not whether it's English or UK English or India English or Singapore English. It's the language that you're familiar with, which also spills over into the cultural barrier. There is time zones. Typically, you're within 1 or 2 time zones of where the work's being done. And if you have to go visit there, you're not having to go fly somewhere halfway around the globe. And then finally, from a legal perspective, there's common laws. It is the laws of, for sake of the discussion, Texas are not that different from the laws in Minnesota. And certainly there's the issue of, invariably people say, well, the only reason we'd outsource is to go reduce costs. And like I said, it's not about reducing costs, it's adding value. And what I would encourage you is that you really want to understand what are the total costs involved. So maybe looking at the 3 options that we're most familiar with. One is to handle these peaks, you want to go hire more resources. And certainly, all these things come into play, whether it's overhead or computers or software or training. What happens when you get caught up? When you are in that valley, do you have to go lay people off? And all of those are true if you hire more resources. If you hire a freelancer, while they are coming in and there is no overhead cost, what you pay them is what you pay them. Invariably, there is the issue of space. There's certainly the issue of project management. You may have the issues of the software, the training, but the good news is when you hit a valley or get caught up or get through your technology transition, you don't have to lay them off. You just terminate the contract. And no hard feelings. Everybody understands that's how it is going into the game. But with outsourcing, a lot simpler in that you don't have to provide all these aspects. You don't have to provide the computers, the training. Yes, there is the overall big picture project management, but the day-to-day activities, the outsourced firm will handle. And when you're caught up, you let them know, hey, we're caught up. The work's going to stop, or it's going to slow down for a while, and that's fine. So how does this work? What does the process look like? And I certainly wouldn't say that this is how it works all the time for everybody, but this is typically the process. I wouldn't say that this is unique to any given outsource firm, but I've broken this up into pre-sales, pre-production, and production. In the pre-sale world, there is the understanding of what is the scope, what are the needs, how do we, what are the materials involved, what are the formats, what are the IT, is everything going to be cloud-based, Do we have a LAN access to files? And how's that going to look like? What is it? What are the technical issues of what's going to be done? Are we creating new content? Are we revising existing content? How do we do that? What is the interface with SMEs? What is the interface with your existing writing staff? So once you get through those preliminary discussions, then typically it becomes a draft SOW, statement of work, that says, here is the understanding of what the scope is, and here's how we propose to go do the business terms that goes with this, and then that leads to a statement of work, and if everyone's agreeable with it, a purchase order. Now, this page is typically done without cost to you. It is a cost of doing business with the outsourced firm. So once you've agreed upon what is the scope, what is the statement of work, how are we going to go do it, then we get into what's called a pre-production process. And that is to confirm the scope, confirm and start working those logistics issues. How do what are the feedback issues? What is the quality plan? How are you going to have a dashboard? Are you going to have a dashboard to see where your work is at all the time? Because it's not as simple as walking over to the next cubicle and saying, hey, where are you at with this manual? It's look at a dashboard. Okay, here's where it's at. We encourage people to go through pilots or proof of concepts, and there's a little bit of a difference, but a pilot we see is almost pre-production, whereas a proof of concept is, yeah, can you do it? So go through a pilot process. Does that give you the results that you need? If it doesn't, go back and do it again. If it does, okay, great. Let's go ramp up to a mutually agreed upon schedule. How long do this slide is invariably weeks, not months, not years, but certainly not days. And then the production process, and you'll see that this is a loop. So there is some mutually agreed upon schedule as far as how the content is going to be processed. Invariably, there are metrics to go understand how you're doing, whether that's a cost per page, errors per page, time spent per topic, if we're in a data paradigm, blah, blah, blah. And those metrics will allow you to go understand how we're doing, what can be improved, if anything. And a good outsource partner will come back and make suggestions and say, hey, we notice we're doing this step over and over and over. If we can automate it, it will, at the end of the day, reduce the cost and improve the quality of the content. So there are suggestions that are made while initially it is an exact replication of your processes and your workflow. As we've done this, and most outsourcing firms have been doing this for a while, and can come back and say, you can improve it if you do this and this and this. Whether you actually do that or not, or whether you pilot, which, oh, by the way, you should, and make sure are the improved results meeting expectations. So go through that process and then improve your process, and it's a loop that continues and continues. Invariably, resources are cross-trained because people take vacation, and you would rather have an entire team that is familiar with your content instead of one or two people. So beyond the honeymoon, once you have been doing this for a while, what can you expect? And one of those things that you should expect is reports and metrics that says, here's how we're doing, here's how the process is going, here's what we're encountering, here's what we're having troubles with. I think there is a huge value in transparency. You should expect process improvements. An outsourcing firm where you've been doing your manuals forever. This outsourcing firm has been doing manuals for a lot of people for a while, and maybe there are new tricks that can be incorporated to go improve how your content is handled. And you should always expect communications. When partners stop answering the phone, that's a bad sign. So there should always be open communications. So just to kind of repeat, I think you should have partners that are honest and engaged with you. You should have a plan that will allow you to go manage your production workflow, whether it be a temporary thing like catch-up, like not catch-up, the red sauce, like a technology transition, or just the variable WIP. We think there's tremendous value in having a process that's relatively close to home. And you should definitely understand what is the risk and what is the value proposition. So if we were going to provide a checklist, here is the checklist that we would suggest. And I'll give you credit for being able to go read this, but we've tried to provide a reason why we think the capability that we have identified is important. And if you, I'll just say this as an aside so that you're not doing screenshots, which of course you can, but if you would like a copy of the slide deck, we can certainly provide this. So if I were to summarize, I think maybe 4 main bullet points. We encourage people to go prepare for this before they get there. If they're going to go implement a new technology, okay, you know what that schedule is, and you can anticipate with your systems integrator what is the workload going to be, what is the training schedule going to be, how long and for when am I going to be having to support 2 separate systems before I cut over from one to the other. We feel that U.S.-based partners minimize the risk, Canadian-based partners minimize the risk because of the consistency in language, because of the consistency in culture, because it's convenient to get there. We've talked to firms that said, gosh, it seems like I was going to my outsourced vendor every month and it was a really long airplane ride, which is a pain. We would encourage you to have a process identified in place so that you know exactly what you're going to get, so that it's well defined how it works, and it should be broad enough that it works, but specific enough that it's tailored to your situation. And finally, a solution that becomes more efficient and offers long-term cost reductions we think is important, because invariably there are improvements to the process. Invariably there are ways to do things faster, cheaper, more efficiently that will offer a long-term cost reduction. So it's, whereas you're paying something now, you can either have more throughput for the same amount of money or less money for the same amount of throughput. So I have, looks like, Scott, we are 17, 18 minutes after the hour, so I came in a minute or 2 under. Please don't hold it against me. I would ask if you use the chat function that is on the right side of your screen if you have questions, and we will try and answer them. Here's my contact information if you want to call me, and I say this in all sincerity, you know, if you like the presentation, let me know. But if you didn't like the presentation, let me know. I appreciate that you so far spent 20 minutes with us today. Your time is important. We see it that way. And if I can make these types of presentations more valuable, I learned something along the way, and I sincerely appreciate your feedback. So without that, going any further, Scott, I'm going to hand things back over to you, and do we have any questions?
Okay, we do have a couple of questions. I wanted to mention, as you mentioned, that you can enter those questions into the questions box if you have any. And also, if you want to request any slides like Don was talking about, go ahead and email him at dbridges@janacorp.com, or you can send a general email to solutions@janacorp.com. Either way, just request the slides from the February 9th webinar, and we'll be happy to send those to you. The first question that we've got here, Don, question, do I have to supply the software used by the outsourcing company?
And that's a little bit of a tough one to answer, Scott, and for the reason being is it's difficult for me to tell you, you know, to paint a broad brush and say, yeah, everybody does things the same way. And the answer is maybe. It depends. I can tell you with Jana that typically Jana would supply the software that's being used. We would, Jana would basically replicate your environment. So if you're using a specific version of XMetal, that's the version that we would use. We would specifically integrate with your CMS or CCMS if you're using those. If you're using a version 1.2 of the data DTD, that's what we would use. If you're using specializations, again, a data term, that's what we would use. So we would basically replicate your environment, and we would use the same exact software that your in-house writers use. And that takes one variable out of the equation.
Okay. Thank you for that. And a second question. Are outsourced tech writers also subject matter experts?
Very good question. And the answer invariably is no. Outsourced writers are going to usually write for a lot of different kinds of companies on a lot of different kinds of content. And so where we instill and expect the expertise is with the data model, and knowing what the data model supports, knowing what the data model doesn't support, and also utilizing your style guide, your writing guide, to define how you have implemented the data model or the template to go write content. The hosting or the outsourcing company will generally have their own SMEs, and while I think it's important to have a high-level understanding of this is what you're writing about, to say that that's also SME, I don't think is realistic.
Okay. Unless we have any other last-minute questions, I think that's it for our Q&A session. Just a little note here that this webinar will be available soon on janacorp.com/webinars. You can also go to janacorp.com/webinars to view any of the other webinars that we've done in the past. And with that, I will thank you very much for joining today's webinar, brought to you by Jana Inc. and presented by Dawn Bridges. Thank you all very much for coming, and enjoy the rest of your day.
All right, thank you.